Awesome, awesome. Now the recording has started. Again, we're going to do a quick overview of the portal itself for some of our more beginner users. We're not going to go too much into detail, but we'll be going over different things like resource groups, virtual networks, availability sets, virtual machines. We'll actually deploy a virtual machine within this tenant for today or this practice environment, and really show you guys the best tips and tricks for not only setting up those virtual machines, but really the best tips and practices for saving money in general within this cloud computing platform. And that really gets me into my second way I need your guys' participation. And my second way I need your guys' participation is through our good to go checks. So we'll be going over a lot of different modules, a lot of different concepts for today. And just to make sure that everyone has a chance to catch up, and also to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask a question if they have one, we'll be doing good to go or GTG checks throughout today's session. So if I ask for a good to go check or a GTG, I would want you to just go ahead and put a good to go in the chat, just so I know you're ready to move on with the next section of today's lab, and to make sure that if you have any questions, you have the opportunity to do so. So if you were able to successfully log into the Azure portal for today and you see something on your screen similar to mine, if not exactly the same, go ahead and please give me that GTG or good to go in the chat so I know we're ready to move on with today's session. Awesome. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Ruben, Bruce, Eddie. Awesome. Awesome. All right, let's kind of get started here then. Just give me those good to goes just to make sure we are good to go. Thank you, Donald. Thank you, Chuck. Really appreciate your guys' participation. And just to give some context of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about Microsoft Azure or Azure Portal. And I already see most of you guys are more intermediate users, but for a few of our beginner users for today, what we're going to be talking about is basically the best tips and practices to get the most out of your cloud. As many of you may have realized, within the last couple of years, we've seen a huge shift from having of our data and storage centers on premises to moving them slowly to the cloud or being managed by a third party or a different party to manage those data centers and servers. And a lot of this has happened because of the pandemic, shift to hybrid and remote work, and just basically everyone wants to go online for the cloud because it's just a lot cheaper, it's scalable, and there's a lot of functionality you can have within this cloud environment. So we're really going to be talking about the best tips and tricks for saving money in this in our cloud journey. And I also want to ask another poll question before we get started, just asking everyone where they're at within their cloud journey. Are some of you fully migrated to the cloud? Do some of you have a hybrid cloud in place? Do some of you still on premises? Just really want to get a good idea on where everyone is at in their cloud journey. And if you want to give us a little bit more detail, go ahead and throw in the chat if you want to, some more details on if you have a hybrid cloud environment, but you're thinking about fully switching to the cloud. If you're on premises and want to migrate to the cloud, go ahead and throw in the chat as well. Just let me know where you are at in your cloud journey and what you hope to get out of today's session, just to make sure, again, that I'm giving you the greatest and best information possible. And I can already see from the get-go, we have a couple people who are thinking about moving to the cloud, which is cool to see because we'll be going over a lot of good tips and tricks, but we have a lot of people here who have a hybrid cloud environment. And depending on your use case or why you have a hybrid cloud, some people may have a hybrid cloud because they're transitioning fully to the cloud, or some people may have a hybrid cloud just because it suits their organization's needs better. So we'll be going over some great tips and tricks for people who do have those hybrid clouds in place. Awesome, awesome. And remember that no matter experience level, again, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns throughout today's lab, please just always ask because we're more than happy to help you out. But appreciate everyone voting in that poll, but let's go ahead and get started with our overview of the portal. If you want to follow along with me for today's exercises, as you can see here, my cursor is in the middle of my screen. I have a little pointer tool as well to make it a lot easier for you to follow along with me today. But the first place we're going to start is in the top right-hand corner, and we're going to make our way down into the left-hand side as well. Of course, Gaia will, excuse me, hopefully I'm not mispronouncing your name. We'll definitely send you the recording afterwards in our follow-up. No worries. And if you want to sit back, relax, and just take notes throughout, more than welcome to do so. First and foremost, just want to call your attention to your user ID or credentials in the top right-hand corner. This is going to be super important because when we're choosing our resource groups or our assets a little bit later today, we're going to be choosing the resource group or assets that are associated with our user ID. And if we ever forget what our user ID is, it's up here at the top right-hand corner. For example, if you're ACIE1, you'll be choosing resource group ACIE1. If you're ACIE 6, you'll probably be choosing resource group ACIE 6, so on and so forth. Just want to call it out so everyone knows just in case they forget. And then beyond that, we also have our feedback icon. This is where you can send feedback to Microsoft directly. I've never heard anyone get a response, but if you want to be the first to do so, highly recommend it. We also have our support and troubleshooting section here. This is actually where you can send in tickets or if you have any problems with your Microsoft environment directly to Microsoft. Also, the service help portal is located here to see if you have any service issues throughout the Azure environment, because sometimes data centers or just regions will go down, and the service help portal is a really good place to really check out any planned maintenance or any downtime that may be happening within your region. And if we actually went ahead and clicked View Service Health, it will take you to the Service Health portal. And again, just emphasizing that this is where you can find any service issues or planned maintenance that may be happening within your Azure environment. But we can exit out of here and go to our next section or icon, which is going to be that cogwheel icon or our portal settings. And this is really going to get me into my first tip and trick for today. We're going to be doing a lot of pro tips and tricks. And the first one I want to talk about is changing your appearance and startup views. So once you click on this cogwheel icon up here, I want you to go overhead to the left-hand side where the appearance and startup view blades are. Go ahead and click on the blade that says appearance plus startup views. And if you're wondering why I'm calling these blades right here, the reason they're called blades, or as I like to think, is that they're very similar to a switchblade. When you click on a blade, a new window will pop up on your screen, very similarly to a switchblade. When you click on the button on the holster, a blade will pop out of the holster. So what we're going to be doing today is going ahead and click on this blade. This is appearance and startup views, and it's going to open up a new window in the middle right here. And what we're going to do is revert our menu behavior back to what it looks like from the get-go. So if we go ahead and apply these portal settings, when you first purchase Azure or first get your key in order to unlock the Azure portal, this is what it's going to look like from the get-go. So if you go over here to your portal settings up here, go back to appearance plus startup views, what we're going to do is change our menu behavior, our theme, and our startup view, because we want to look like the pros. Because Microsoft actually has these settings that their actual workers use on the daily. If you want to go ahead and change them, I want you to go ahead and follow along with me. Go ahead and change it from fly out to docked. And go ahead and change the theme from Azure to blue. And then finally, for your startup page, go ahead and change it from home to dashboard. Once you've selected all three of those options, I want you to go ahead and click on apply on the very bottom of your screen here. And as you can see here, changes have just happened. And the reason we want to follow along with these changes is because from an actual study from Microsoft directly, they've seen a 60 to 70% increase in productivity just from changing your portal settings alone. Because if you have the dock over here on this left-hand side, you have quick and easy access points to everything within your environment. Anything from resource groups to virtual machines to virtual networks, they're all readily available on your dock over here. And again, just quick and easy access points. And then we went ahead and changed the theme from Azure to blue because we want high contrast between our dock and our icons and our workspace. The workspace is that area in the middle, that white area, and then the dock and the icons are the high contrast, darker areas. And the reason you want them to be high contrast is because if you're looking at your screen from anywhere from 5 minutes to 5 hours, you want to make sure that one, it's easy on your eyes, and two, that you're not accidentally misclicking anything at any point. With the other themes, it's a little bit less contrast, so you can get kind of confused on where you're clicking. This shows clear contrast between your workspace and your quick and easy access points. And if you went ahead and go back to the home screen, just go ahead and click My Dashboard or go to Microsoft Azure top left-hand corner. Nope. Or sorry, not this one right here. Go ahead to Home right here. Oh, it didn't update. Well, usually what ends up happening is the services section here would change to make it look more like a dashboard. Again, just more user-friendly. But beyond this cogwheel icon, we have our bell icon. And this bell icon is just going to be used for our notification center, just in case not just in case, when we're going to be deploying assets and resources today, our notification center is just going to give us those intermittent updates to let us know, hey, something has successfully deployed and we're ready to go. Beyond that, we have our directories and subscriptions. We're not going to be using anything here. This is what I like to call the notebook and funnel icon. And then from beyond there, we're going to go ahead to the command line icon. And this is going to open up our Cloud Shell or our Microsoft PowerShell. And what I like to tell people in this area is that there's three really main ways of deploying assets or resources within Azure. And again, these are really good pro tips and tricks. The first one being through the Azure portal itself or portal.azure.com. This is usually the most easy or beginner way to deploy assets or resources because one, there's a graphical user interface that makes it really easy to track stuff. And two, this website is really helpful because it lets you to edit or scale up and down anything you may have within your environment. Very user-friendly, icons, very, much easier to digest and understand compared to the other two methods. So that's the first method of deploying assets and resources. And the second method is through your own or through the Azure PowerShell or the Azure Cloud Shell here. And this is where you can actually upload your own code to deploy assets or resources. So if you prefer to code to, make your resources or your assets, you can code them and upload it to this PowerShell right here, which is really awesome because if you prefer that methodology, you can easily do so right here, just right inside the Azure portal. But, the Cloud Shell is pretty intuitive. If you type in a bunch of random mumbo jumbo, it will give you a bunch of errors or letting you know the file isn't executable. And not only that as well, if it's not executable and you don't know how to read those errors right there, then this process is probably not going to be as helpful for you as compared to the Azure portal itself. But the third and final way of deploying assets within Azure is through your own PowerShell. So again, if you prefer to code, you can link your own PowerShell. Like for example, if you prefer using Visual Studios, you can link your PowerShell to the Azure PowerShell and you can upload your code through your own PowerShell. And so this is again, just for people who prefer to use their own programs or methodologies. So again, just another way of uploading code. And if you don't know how to read code or read errors, it's not going to be as helpful as the first method. So just always like to highlight those three methods just because sometimes people don't know about it or they just don't even know that the capabilities of those ways you can deploy assets or resources. But beyond there, we can go ahead and exit out of the PowerShell there. Just want to show you very quickly. And then that gets us to our search bar up here at the very top. And what our search bar utilizes is something called Microsoft Search. And what Microsoft Search is basically an artificial intelligence unit that helps gather data to figure out what you're trying to look up within the environment. It gathers data from documents you recently accessed, documents that you access frequently, documents you may have shared with other people. Basically, it collects all that data and kind of gives you the best search results based on what you're typing in. So let's go ahead and follow along with this exercise. Let's say, for example, we're typing in availability set. And if you don't know how to spell like me, you just type in Apple Victor Apple or AVA. And when you type in Apple Victor Apple or AVA, a bunch of things will pop up underneath our search bar here. We have three sections here: services, marketplace, and documentation. Just to break them down very simply for all of you, services are just services that Microsoft provides for us directly. Anything from availability sets to function apps, app services. These are approved services by Microsoft that they help serve out to their patrons or their customers. And then the marketplace. The marketplace is where independent software vendors, better known as ISVs, can upload their code to make Azure environments faster. A lot of the time, this code can range from either being completely free to costing money, but it's really dependent on what you need for your environment at that current time. So I highly recommend checking out the marketplace. I think there's around 4,000 tertiary services offered on the marketplace, all created by independent software vendors. So if you want to learn more about optimizing your environment, check out the marketplace. But again, make sure you're picking a program that really suits your organization's needs. And then finally, we have our documentation. And this will just give you documentation about anything and everything you may be looking up within your environment. So let's say, for example, we type in availability, we type out the full word here. All the documentation that would appear would be anything relating to availability. Everything from availability options to availability sets would all appear under documentation. And this is this is official Microsoft Learning Docs. So they're really helpful, but they're kind of dry. So if you prefer to read, just go ahead with that method. But like I said, want to learn more information, you're getting it directly from Microsoft. And then from beyond there, we can go ahead and exit out of the search bar. And we can go over here to this left-hand side where our doc is located. So normally when you go through this lab through Microsoft or a lab similar like this with Microsoft, when they tell you to create a resource, they're going to tell you to go to the create a resource blade here. This is going to get me into my next pro tip and trick, but for right now, let's go ahead and navigate to the blade that says create a resource. Welcome, Hugh. No worries. We're just getting started here today. One of my moderators here, Ishmael, is going to throw some credentials in the chat for you if you want to follow along with us today, Hugh. But to continue on, we're going to be going over create a resource right here. And as you can see here under create a resource, it is just quite frankly, really disorganized. There's a lot of click points. The icons are really large. It says create docs, MS Learn, a lot of click points. Again, like I just mentioned, just really overall really confusing and just not well categorized. So for our next pro tip and trick, when we're creating a resource, instead of going to create a resource to create that resource, I know repetitive and everything, but instead of going to create a resource to create a resource, instead we're going to go to the all services blade, or what I like to call the hamburger blade. Excuse me. And the reason I call it the hamburger blade instead of the all services blade is because next to all services, this icon right here kind of looks like a sandwich. We got 3 lines on top of each other with the pickles on the side. So we call that the all services blade or the hamburger blade. So I want you to go ahead and click on that hamburger blade for me. And it's going to redirect you to the all services page here. And as you can see here, it's much more well organized. Everything's organized into categories. The icons aren't as large. There isn't as many click points. It's obvious where you're going. So for creating a resource, I recommend always going to all services just because it's easier to navigate. But that gets us into our first module for today, which is going to be our resource groups. So I want you to go ahead and navigate to the section that says resource groups. I want you to go ahead and access those resource groups. Go ahead and click on the icon that says resource groups. It's going to redirect you to this new page here. If your screen looks different from mine, that's totally normal. It's because I have different admin privileges compared to the rest of you guys. So if you only see 1 or 2 resource groups, don't freak out or anything, but I have access to all the resource groups here today. And before we get started talking about resource groups, I know a majority of us here are more intermediate users. So I want to just take a moment to just ask everyone, does everyone know what a resource group is? And if you do know what a resource group is, please just put in the chat what you think a resource group is. Kind of just want to get a good idea on everyone's understanding of resource groups. Because if needed, I can do an explanation. I know we have a couple beginner users here, so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page on our understanding of resource groups. But go ahead and please put your definition of what you think a resource group is, and I can kind of give a little detail, I guess, since we do have some beginners here. And how I always like to describe resource groups as our fences. And these fences help contain our resources. So that's a little hint right there. Container directory. Awesome, Jose. You're ready to speak of the same words I am. Anyone else have anything else they want to add here? Because again, like I said, they are containers for resources, but it's a little bit deeper than that because there's some other aspects I always like to highlight in regards to resource groups in general. I understand it as a tag. Okay, Joyce, let me, it's more like a tag is tags can be used for resources inside resource groups. They're not really specifically, you can tag a resource group, but I'll go ahead and explain a little bit more. Departments for billing, those are actually tags too, Chuck. But resource groups can help you compartmentalize each of your departments for billing actually. So I'll kind of get into it in just a moment. Can manage as a group. You're all, I love this participation, everyone. I really appreciate it. But yeah, everyone's on the right page. Everyone's on the same track. I really love that. Everyone's already kind of up to date on what a resource group is. But just for edification purposes, to describe it even further, like I said, resource groups are containers or fences to help us contain our resources to a certain area. And how I always like to describe resource groups in application or in a real world scenario is imagine a construction site. You're on the 46th floor of your apartment building and you're observing a construction site building 2 skyscrapers. One on the left-hand side being built by construction company ABC, and one on the right side being constructed by construction company XYZ. And these two construction companies are both building their skyscrapers right next to each other and sharing the same construction site. And you keep observing, this scenario play out, and you notice something quite peculiar. You notice that in between the two construction companies, that there's no fence in between them. So you think to yourself, why is that a problem? Why can that be an issue? Well, you keep observing and you notice something, that both of these construction companies both have their resources on each of their sides. On ABC's side, they have their own cranes, wood, steel, and workers to help build their skyscraper. And same thing with over on XYZ side, they have their own wood, steel, cranes, and workers to help build their skyscraper. Well, let's say some of those workers on XYZ, they went on their lunch break. They went over to across the street to grab a sandwich at the local deli. And while they were gone, workers at ABC walked over to the right-hand side where XYZ was located, and they took some wood. They took some steel. They're even driving the cranes back over to their construction area at ABC. And lo and behold, the workers at XYZ are coming back from their lunch break, and they're like, holy smokes, holy Moses, where did all of our resources go? Not only did we pay for those resources, but we didn't even get the chance to use them. And so how I always describe this is, at the end of the day, this is a loss of control. You don't know what is being moved where. You don't know who is moving what. You basically just don't know what's happening within your own systems. And this can be a huge problem for anyone's environment, because transferring this to our cloud environment, if you give someone access to the entire Azure portal, that can create a lot of issues because you're giving them access to all of the resources. And not everyone has malintentions or malpractices. However, people make mistakes all the time. I make mistakes daily. I'm sure everyone else can relate to this, but basically sometimes, someone may move a file. You may have a new hire and they're working on a project or solution, and, they don't know what they're doing and they accidentally move something, or they think they're moving something to the right place, but then they end up moving it to the wrong place. Or, we see it all the time. People delete things and, people delete things on accident. I always like to recall the Toy Story 2 incident. They had the whole Toy Story 2 movie on the flash drive, and someone deleted the flash drive, or deleted the movie on the flash drive. And luckily, someone had a backup copy of the movie, but basically, they almost lost the entirety of the movie just because someone made a small mistake. Or not a small mistake. That's obviously a really big mistake. But that's why our resource groups really come in handy, because what we can do with that construction area or construction site is we could have segmented them off or contain them into a certain area using a fence, thus allowing them to still work on their skyscraper with the resources they were designated. However, they don't have the capabilities of going over to the other construction site and taking their resources without their permission or their knowledge. And so that's why our resource groups are super important, because we can segment, contain people into a certain area or project. Let's say, for example, we have 2 people working on a project and we don't want them messing with other projects within our environment. Well, we can deploy a resource group and assign those 2 people to that resource group so they can still work on their project or solution. And they have all the resources necessary to make that project or solution. So just want to take a moment here. Did that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions on what a resource group is? Because in just a moment, I'm going to give you some more information on how you really can customize and beef up the security within your resource groups. Again, some more tips and tricks. If everyone's good to go, just give me awesome, Bruce, you read my mind. Yeah, just give me that GTG in the chat. All right, perfect. Anyone have any questions? Just want to take a moment to. If not, give me a GTG, or we'll start to move on to as well. Awesome, Chris, Ruben, appreciate it. Thank you, Eddie, Tony, awesome. You guys are a great class. I'm really enjoying this right now. All right, let's get into some of the ways you can customize those resource groups themselves. Again, helping you beef up the security, or really make those resource groups a little bit stronger than the strongest they can be within your organization. So what I want you to do is go ahead and click on your resource group associated with your user ID. For example, if you're ACID1, go ahead and choose resource group ACID1. Since I'm DGallego at Azure Direct, I'm going to go ahead and access the Dylan resource group. And the first place I want you guys to access is this access control blade up here at the very top, or our identity and access management blade, or IAM. Go ahead and click on that blade up there at the very top. And what we're going to be talking about are role assignments. So let's say, for example, we have those two people we deploy that resource group for, and they're both working on that project or solution. One of them being the CEO of the company and the other one being an intern. So let's say, for example, we want the project lead to be our CEO of the company, and we want the intern to really just observe and just kind of make no changes to the project itself because it's a high-profile project. Well, you don't want to risk your intern accidentally moving or deleting something just in case they end up working on the project. But what you can do to help, add that extra layer of security or customization is you can add role assignments. So I want you to go ahead to the roles blade right here in the middle, or the roles tab, I mean. And as you can see here, there's a plethora and a variety of different roles you can choose from for your resource groups. So let's say, for example, you want that CEO having unfiltered access to everything and anything within that resource group. Well, you can give them the owner role so they have the capabilities of doing so. However, you want to be safe, you want to be proactive instead of reactive, and you want to make sure the intern isn't messing with anything within that project or solution within that resource group. Well, lo and behold, you can give them the reader role, and so they can only view all resources, but doesn't allow them to make any changes. Really helping you again to customize your resource group, because if you have more than, let's say, 2 people, maybe you have 100 people in there, you want to make sure that everyone is assigned their designated role or job. And so again, as you can scroll down, there's a lot of different options you can choose from in regards to role assignments. But, I just like to show that, if you don't really know how to set those up, that's really the opportunity to go to your IT team, your security team, to help you set up those roles or role assignments, because again, you want to be proactive instead of reactive. You don't want someone to accidentally change something or delete something because you didn't assign them a role or you didn't put them in a resource group. Again, just an extra layer of security. And that really gets us into our next thing I want to talk about, which is going to be our policies blade. So I want you to go over here to this left-hand side where this policies blade is located. And here we can see that we have 2 rules or policies already set in place. And basically what these policies or rules are just overarching laws that people have to follow within that resource group. And so if someone broke one of those rules, it would let me know, hey, someone's following non-compliant behavior. Please address it in the manner you so desire. And so again, this is just adding that extra layer of security. Excuse me, everyone. Did not want to hear you blow up your ears with my coughing sounds. Apologies. Winter season. But anyways, as you can see here, we have 2 policies already put into place. And just keep in mind as well, not every policy is going to fit every organization. Every organization is different and are looking out for different things. And again, this is where having a security team is really important within your IT space, because you want to make sure these policies are, 1, being set up, and 2, you want to make sure they're fitting your organization's needs. And you can see these 2 policies here, just kind of describe them. That not allow resource types is to prevent anyone from creating resources they are not supposed to. This is just a really good way of just making sure that that no one is creating they're not supposed to, especially within today's lab. So if someone, I'm sure you're all really great, wonderful, and nice people. I trust all of you. But this is, again, just to be proactive instead of reactive. This is to make sure that no one in today's tenant or anyone accessing our environments is creating anything they're not supposed to. And if someone did create something they're not supposed to, we have the capabilities of, tracking that down and figuring out who is doing what or making the things they're not supposed to. And again, this is kind of, I want to hark back to what someone said earlier about helping departments for billing. This really helps, reduce your billing costs and everything as well, because no one's creating what we like to call zombie resources, meaning like resources that aren't being used. And 2, again, it helps with billing and everything, just because if you have these policies in place, you're making sure that people aren't creating things they're not supposed to, reducing your billing costs as well. And then also we want to make sure we have policies that really prevent anyone from doing anything malicious as well. And this virtual machine size SKUs really helps enable that, because I'm going to share with you guys a story that happened to one of the clients we were working with in regards to just their Azure environment. So, I work for the Kranzer Group. I work closely with Sherman Kranzer. We work with a lot of Microsoft partners and just people in the IT space. And, one of our clients came up to us and was like, hey, Sherman, Dylan, we're having some problems with our monthly Azure spend. Suddenly out of nowhere, we were charged $24,000, and we're usually only charged about $1,000 per month. Could you just go in there and just kind of see if you can find anything or just any reasoning why we're charged that exuberant amount? And of course, we kind of went into the environment, checked out all the resources, went to see, what could possibly be the problem. And lo and behold, someone, unbeknownst to our client, had created an excessively large virtual machine. And that virtual machine was mining Bitcoin. And if there's one thing I can tell you right now about mining Bitcoin is that it costs a lot, and I mean a lot of electricity. And guess who ended up paying for that electricity? The client at hand. And because of that, what we found was that we only found the virtual machine running for 2 days straight, only 2 days. And so that means just from one day of the machine running 24 hours, he was charged $12,000. I don't know about most of us here today. I personally do not have $12,000 or $24,000 to throw away like that. And I'm sure most of you will agree that anyone would be stressed to be in that situation. And that's why, again, having these policies in place or having a security team to really help you set these up is super important and vital, just because you want to be proactive instead of reactive. And I know when I share that story with people, it really sobers people up, because they're like, oh my goodness, that could even happen to me. And everyone's susceptible to cybersecurity attacks. There's been an 86% increase between 2020 to 2022 alone, or 2020 to 2021, my apologies. Just because, as you know, we're all online now. We're using our computers almost every single day. So we got to make sure we're being up to speed and using the best practices possible. Again, just more pro tips and tricks. And that just leads me to another poll question here today. I just always like to see, do you have a security team in place to really go about, setting up these foundational security policies inside of Azure? Again, this isn't to call anyone out, but just to want to see if, where people's thoughts are at, or really kind of where they lie in the scope or terms of, making sure these policies and these things are put into place. Awesome. Majority of us are, I'm right seeing about majority of us do. Oh, it's about half and half, actually. Which is not, I want to say surprising, but at the same time, you really should have a security team in place, because, again, we are in the era of cybersecurity attacks, everyone. So we want to make sure, again, we're being proactive instead of reactive, and that we're doing things that really just prevent that from happening in the first place. Awesome. Awesome. Really appreciate you all voting in those polls here today. And again, it's about half and half. About half of us have said yes, and the other half have said no. And again, not to make anyone feel bad or call anyone out, but just to get those conversations rolling with the appropriate people if you have them at your organization. But beyond that, let's go ahead and start creating our virtual machine. Again, I know everyone voted in that poll just now. Does anyone have any questions on resource groups, compliance center, policies, or access control? Just want to take a moment as well. Does anyone want me to explain a little bit more into that? I can 100% do that if needed, but if not, we can go ahead and start creating our virtual machine. All right, no questions. Perfect. Cool. Let's get into our next section for today, everyone, and go into virtual networks. This is going to be an important component of our virtual machine itself. So in order to access our virtual machines, I want you to go over here to this left-hand side where the All Services blade is located. And from here, we're going to go ahead and access the virtual networks icon. Go ahead and access that icon here. And in short, what a virtual network is basically a connection between two computers. Whether the computers be virtual or physical, it doesn't really matter. We're just going to be connecting the two together with this virtual network. And again, this is an important part of our virtual machine. So we're going to go ahead and create that virtual network. Go ahead and click on that big blue plus button at the very top and go ahead and create this virtual network with me here today. Awesome, awesome. We'll be going from left to right for each of our tabs and top to bottom for each of our details. And if you want to ever get more information on each section, please just let me know, or you can hover over the information icon and just give you a brief description of each section here. But first and foremost, for our first part, our subscription, we're going to go ahead and leave it as the Microsoft Azure subscription. This is just going to be our logical grouping of resources. Basically, all of our resources are in the Azure environment, so we're going to go ahead and choose Microsoft Azure. Our resource group, we're going to go ahead and choose the resource group associated with our user ID. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Dylan resource group. If you're ACIE1, you're going to choose resource group ACIE1. For our naming convention, we're going to go ahead and name it something super simple and straightforward. I'm just going to go ahead and name it Demo Lab VN, standing for Virtual Network -01. And to make it easy for everyone, if you want to copy and paste it, I just put it into the chat window for you all. And then for our region, we're going to want to choose the region closest to our actual location. The reason being is because we want the least amount of distance between us and the data centers. Within each of these regions are multiple data centers, and the less distance that needs to be traveled, the faster we're able to access our data or our resources. So in order for us to access those as quickly as possible, please choose the location closest to your actual region, or please choose the region actually closest to your location. For example, I'm in Southern California over here on the West Coast, so I'm going to go ahead and choose the West US region. If, for example, you are on the East Coast in Boston, Massachusetts, you'll probably go ahead and choose the East US region. Just realized I was pointing like left and right. Hopefully this side is west and this side is east, but you get the idea, right? All right, all right. Let's go ahead to our next section here, which is going to be our IP addresses. Go ahead and click on that tab up at the very top that says IP addresses. And we're not going to make any changes here. Actually, from the get-go, we are provided an IP address and subnet. Previously, in the past, you actually had to create your own IP address and subnet, which can be kind of confusing especially for beginner users. So Microsoft has made it a little easier and provided us one from the get-go. So we're not going to make any changes here. However, if you wanted to create your own or add your own, you could easily do so. You can input in this box right here. You can click on Add Subnet. But for today, we'll go ahead and leave those defaulted. This next tab up at the very top is going to be our security tab or our virtual network tab. And this is basically where we're enabled to basically add extra layers of security within our virtual network or virtual machine. And the big thing I want you all to double, triple, quadruple, quintuple check is to make sure this DDoS protection standard is disabled. Because if you choose to enable it, it actually costs around $3,000 for you to enable. And that costs a lot of money, but really what it does is add that extra layer of really strong security for people who may be under scrutiny or maybe people in a political campaign, really to protect yourself from those DDoS attacks, which are basically large scale attacks to really overload or overload your page or your website. Again, just extra layer of security. Bastion host is again more for web pages, and then firewalls is more for connecting your own firewall to the Azure firewall. But for today, we'll leave all three of those disabled. We'll go ahead and move on to tags here. And this is kind of where we're talking about consolidating billing and categorizing resources, because what we can do is we can add tags to things like our virtual networks or our virtual machines. And this helps you categorize those resources and really consolidate your billing. Again, resource groups is a good way to really kind of visually inspect and kind of figure out where things are segmented or compartmentalized. And this tag section here really adds that extra layer of if you want more specificity for those different resources or those different things within those resource groups. So tags are super awesome, but we're not going to be using them today. We can go on ahead to our last and final tab up here at the very top, which is going to be our review and create section up here. As you can see here, our validation passed, which means we're good to go. And if we got all are good to go and got that green check mark, go ahead and make sure that your details are similar to mine here. And if so, go ahead and click on that big blue button at the bottom that says create. And you should have got a green check mark at the very top, which means your validation passed, which means you are good to go. So if your validation passed and you got that green check mark and you were able to successfully deploy your virtual network, you'll also be able to see it within your notification center up here that your deployment was successful. And if so, just go ahead and give me a GTG or good to go in the chat, just so we know we can move on to our next module or section, which is going to be availability sets. Thank you, Eddie. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here for just a moment, everyone. Sorry, I just got a message. Just want to read it real quick. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Chuck, Joyce, Al, Donald, Serene. Really appreciate it. Oh, sorry, Joyce. I noticed your name is Frank, actually. Frank Joyce. I didn't mean to disrespect. I know our names are important to us. Don't want to mispronounce. And I just noticed something too. My computer is unplugged right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and plug it in real quick. Hopefully no one was cringing seeing my battery go down that entire time. That always gets me going. Not gets me going, but I always think it's funny. What's it called? When you're doing presentations, the battery's slowly closing down. Tony, see your message here. ACIE 10 Azure subscription is disabled. No worries. Ishmael, can you give Tony some new credentials for us today, please? Appreciate it. I'm going to go plug in my computer real quick. I will be back in less than a second here. One would call that a Bill Gates moment, so really apologies for that, everyone. All right, we're charging. We're ready to go, everyone. And Tony, go ahead and log in with those new credentials for me. And if you want me to go back to the virtual network section, I'll take a second to do so after we get through availability sets. But go ahead and log in, and yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. And let me share my screen one more time. All right, let's get this show on the road. From here, we're going to go ahead and start to create our availability set. But in order for us to create our availability set, we're going to have to first access that service first. So in order for us to access it, we're actually going to go ahead and use the search bar, kind of like we were doing earlier. Doing the same exercise we did a little bit earlier, we're going to go ahead and type in availability, or if you don't know how to spell like me, I got that Bachelor of Science, not that Bachelor of English. I'm going to go ahead and type in Apple Victor Apple, or AVA. And from here, you should see availability sets pop up underneath your services section there. If so, go ahead and click on it right there. Awesome, awesome. And from here, from availability sets, we'll know we're in the right place if it says availability sets up here, and we're going to go ahead and create our availability set. Go ahead and click that big blue plus button like you did earlier, and we're going to go ahead and create it. And very similarly, not very similarly, availability sets in short are basically redundancy or redundant copies of our applications or our virtual machines. Because what ends up happening is we all know stuff catches on fire from time to time. There is power outages, network failures, hardware failures. A lot of things can happen to our virtual machines or our that are running our projects or solutions. And sometimes we really can't afford for them to be down for an extended period of time because they need to be run 24/7. Well, what availability sets do, and this is another pro tip and trick, is they actually create redundant copies of your virtual machines just in case if a software or hardware failure happens, only a subset of your virtual machines are impacted, and you can still have your operation or your solution operational and functional, especially if it needs to run 24/7. And availability sets are really reliable just because, one, they're really made to make those redundant copies of virtual machines. And another thing that's really awesome about them is they actually cost around pennies to actually implement and deploy. So as I always like to say, nobody cares about their backups, but everyone cares about their restores. So if you have the ability to deploy those restores with only pennies to pay for it, you might as well take out the opportunity, because it's actually going to cost you a lot more money to kind of make up that SLA agreement you may have missed out on, or make money, or it's going to cost you money to recover the solution you may have lost. So be proactive, not reactive, and make your availability sets. So we're going to go ahead and make an availability set for us today. Same as usual, left to right for our tabs and top to bottom for our details. For our subscription, we're going to go ahead and leave it as the default Microsoft Azure. For our resource group, we're going to go ahead and choose the resource group associated with our user ID. I'm going to once again choose the Dylan resource group. For our availability set, we're going to go ahead and name it AVA set -01. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it in the chat for everyone here. Super simple name. For our region, we're going to go ahead and choose the region we chose previously in our virtual network section. For example, I would choose the West US region. I'm going to go ahead and choose that same region. And for our update domains and fault domains, these are our extra copies in case of specific incidences. For fault domains, those are extra copies just in case a fault happens. Network or hardware failure happens. That sounds like a tongue twister, but basically just 2 extra copies are readily available just in case an incident like that happens. Because we all know stuff catches on fire from time to time, so we want to be proactive instead of reactive. Same thing with the update domains. The update domains are more concerned with scheduled maintenance or planned updates. So let's say, for example, virtual machine 1 needs to update, but you still need to have that project or solution running operational or remain operational. So what would end up happening is that data would be transferred to virtual machine 2. It would allow your solution to remain operational, and then virtual machine 1 can then shut down and do its planned maintenance or schedule updates. Same thing with virtual machine 2. If it needs to update, it will go down and use the following virtual machine to run that solution or project. So update domains are a lot more flexible just because usually maintenance is planned out. So that's why we're going to go ahead and leave it as 2 and 5 for today. And for use managed disks, we're going to go ahead and change it from no to yes. And we're going to go ahead, because we're going to go ahead and attach a data disk later on in the virtual machine section. So go ahead and change all those settings there. From there, we can go ahead to the next tab up here. It's just going to be the advanced tab. We're not going to make any changes here. This is just allowing for proximity placement groups. We're not going to get too much into that for today. So we're going to skip over to the tag section. We're not going to be doing anything here as well. So we can go in here to the last and final section, review plus create. Again, you should have gone a validation pass or another green check mark, which means you are good to go, and your details should look similar, if not exactly the same to mine. If so, go ahead and click on create and go ahead and create that availability set. Should have taken very long to deploy here. So if you got that deployment complete, once again, I'm just going to ask for a quick GTG just to make sure that I'm not leaving anyone behind, because we're going to get into our last and final module here, which is going to be our virtual machines. And then we'll get into a little bit on a tool, or a really good we're going to go over a tool called Surveil to really go over a really great way on how you can really save and reduce your Azure spend with the right optimization practices. So we'll go over Surveil at the very end, but before we get into that, we will make sure to get into the next section, which is going to be our virtual machines. Thank you, everyone, for posting in the chat here. Awesome. Perfect, perfect. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Fernando, Al, Serene, Chris, Donald, Chuck, Eddie. Really appreciate it. Awesome. Well, let's get into the last module for today, which is going to be our virtual machines. In order for us to access our virtual machines, we're going to go over here to the dock on the left-hand side. And all we're going to do is go ahead and click on the blade that says virtual machines. And from here, we're actually going to go ahead and create our virtual machine. And what our virtual machine is a remote computer placed in one of these regions or data centers that we're able to remotely access to do any work or any projects or solutions that we may have. And obviously, there's some fundamental differences between designing something on premises versus something in the cloud. So you're always going to have, to keep that in mind when designing something, especially these virtual machines, because they're not as hard set compared to physical computers. Because the awesome thing about the Azure environment in general is that it is scalable. Scalability is huge because you want to make sure that you're only paying for the resources that you're using. You don't want to overpay for resources or assets you're not obviously using at any point. So really the awesome part about the scalability of virtual machines is that you can change it. You can make it more powerful if you need to. You can make it not as strong or as fast if you need it to be just running at low maintenance the whole entire day. Really a lot of flexibility with that scalability. So what we're going to do is go ahead and click on the big blue plus button right up here at the very top. And we're going to go ahead and select the very top blade up here, which is Azure Virtual Machine. And from here, we're going to go ahead and one more time go from left to right and top to bottom for each of our details. For our subscription, we'll once again leave it as the Microsoft Azure subscription. Just leave it as the default. For our resource group, we're going to go ahead and select the resource group we've been choosing previously. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Dylan resource group. For our virtual machine name, we're going to go ahead and name it something super simple and straightforward. I'm just going to go ahead and name it Demo Lab VM-01. VM standing for virtual machine. For our region, we're going to go ahead and choose the region closest to our actual location or the region we've been choosing previously. Please go ahead and choose the region you chose previously. And for our availability options, this is where everything is going to start coming full circle, because when we look down here on our drop-down menu, we can see availability set is ready for our availability options here. And we can actually choose availability set here. And we're going to go ahead and choose the availability set related or the availability set we created earlier. As you can see here, our AVA set -01 has appeared in our drop-down menu. For our security type, we're going to go ahead and leave it as a standard. And for our image, what that is related to our operating system. If you click on this drop-down menu right here, as you can see here, there is a variety and a plethora of different images or operating systems you can choose from. You can choose anything from Oracle Linux to Ubuntu to Red Hat Linux, or even older versions of Microsoft Windows. And this is kind of cool just because, for example, I used a lot of these programs back when I was first learning or getting familiar with my computer engineering degree. So it's kind of cool that, you're still able to access it within the Azure environment. But it's really dependent on what you prefer for your virtual machines. But for today, we're going to keep it nice and simple. And we're just going to go ahead and choose the Windows Server 2019 Data Center, the Generation 2. So we're going to go ahead and select on that one right there. Should appear in the drop-down menu here. Again, Windows Server 2019 Data Center Generation 2. And for our VM architecture, we're going to go ahead and leave it as the default x64 right there. And then we get down to the virtual machine size. And this is basically the power or the strength of that virtual machine. And we, again, can make it scalable, move it up or down depending on how powerful we want it to be. But for our virtual machine size, we're going to go ahead and leave it as the standard D4S V3 model. And if it doesn't appear as the default, go ahead and select it from the drop-down menu here. And even if it doesn't appear there, go ahead, if you go to see all sizes right here, you can see there is a variety, and I mean a variety of different virtual machine sizes here. You can choose from anything from the D series to the E series to the L series, all readily available for you to use. You can even look up by virtual machine size. So if you want to look up here at the top and just filter through, you could easily do so. If you don't see that D4S V3, you can easily type it right here. And now you have the D4S V3 model readily available for you. So go ahead and select that model right there. It should be around $305 per month. And I really want you to pay close attention to that pricing point because I'm going to show you something really cool on how you can reduce it, especially for our hybrid cloud users here, because I really hope you're all taking this opportunity right now. But if it's a little bit more or a little bit less than $305 per month, that's totally normal. It's really dependent on your region. So different regions are going to have different price points for their virtual machines. So if it's around that price point, you're good, but pay close attention to how much it costs as of right now. And as you can see here, minus $305 per month. That's totally fine, Donald. You probably just have more availability in your region. 274 sounds about right. Thank you for double checking, by the way. But go ahead and make a quick note of that pricing point because it'll come back a little bit later. But for our username and password, we're going to go ahead and use the username demo user and the password.1 exclamation point. The security experts would tell you that is not a good password, but we're going to be using just a sample one for today. And I'll go ahead and paste the password and the username in the chat in just a moment. Just going to input it myself. So we got demo user. That's going to be our username. And then our password is password.1 exclamation point. And for our port rules, we're going to go ahead and leave everything as it is because we'll be using the RDP or remote desktop protocol to actually tap in or get access to our virtual machine. And then finally, here at the bottom, we have our licensing. And it says here we can actually save up to 49% with a license if we're taking part of the Azure hybrid benefit, also known as AHub. And what that is actually Microsoft rewards you for having a hybrid cloud in place. And this is really one of the big cost saving opportunities that people really miss out on just because they don't even know about it in the first place. And so what that is if you have a hybrid cloud, meaning some of your stuff is on premises and some of your stuff in the cloud, Microsoft actually rewards you for up to a 49% discount. And I've seen people not have as much as a 49% discount, and I've seen people get more than a 49% discount. So again, it's really up to the users and the organizations, and just depending on the structure, could be just different cost optimizations. So if you went ahead, if you looked back up, that $305 per month, if you went ahead and checked off both of those boxes here, scroll back up at that pricing point, lo and behold, it has gone down almost $150. And $150 may not seem like a lot to a lot of people. However, if you're running this on a macro scale and you have 100 virtual machines running the AHub benefit or the Azure hybrid benefit, then you're saving around $15,000. And $15,000 is a lot of money that you can be spent to using working on other projects, solutions, giving people pay or bonuses. And, really that $15,000 can be allocated to just different things and because you don't want to waste that money. But for today, we actually don't have a hybrid cloud in place. So we're actually going to uncheck both of those boxes off. And from here, we're going to go into our next tab, which is going to be our disk tab. And right here, what we're going to do is create and attach a new disk. Very straightforward. All you got to do is click on that icon or that click point right there at the very bottom. Everything is good from the get-go. We can go ahead and leave those default settings. And we'll go ahead and select OK at the very bottom. That data disk has now been attached, which means we can go ahead and go to the next section, networking. And it's properly attached if it appears in this drop-down menu here. Should be named something like Demo Lab VM data disk. Go ahead to the next section, which is going to be networking, or the next tab. And we're not going to make any changes here. I just want to show you guys that our virtual network and that IP address and subnet that we created earlier is now being integrated within our virtual machine, which is pretty cool. And then finally, we can actually skip over management, monitoring, advanced, and tags because we won't be making any changes in there and go into our last and final section, review plus create. And you should have gotten a validation pass or another green check mark, which means you are good to go. Just taking a moment. Validation pass, got that green check mark, means you're good to go. Scroll down a little bit down here. And as you can see here, my details are good to go. If you want to take a second to copy them, you can do so as well. But if your validation passed and you are ready to good to go and you have the same details as mine, go ahead and click on create. Go ahead and click create. And this virtual machine is actually going to take about 4 to 5 minutes for it to actually deploy. So in the meantime, I want to give you guys a quick video on something called Surveil. And what Surveil is a read-only cost optimization tool for all M365 products and Azure services. And what it does is it really goes into your tenant, and with read-only access kind of breaks down the different pricing points you have within your Azure environment or M365 licenses. And I'll let the video do most of the talking, but this is an incredible one-of-a-kind tool to really break down and figure out how you can save money, especially in these turbulent times. So while this virtual machine is going to be deploying, again, around be 4 to 5 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and play a short video just to show you guys a little bit more about Surveil. It's about 10 minutes long, but I'm not going to play the whole thing, just a couple minutes while this virtual machine deploys. Just give me one moment while I pull it up, everyone. And again, really appreciate everyone sticking around this long as well. If anyone has any questions on the virtual machine deployment, please just let me know. But in the meantime, I'll let the video do the talking. Take about 5 minutes or so. Then we'll finish up with the virtual machine deployment, show you guys how it actually works. And then we'll kind of, at the end of the last couple of minutes, just kind of break down more about Surveil and just really the best practices in general. Sorry, everyone, my computer's been a little slow. Awesome, Donald. Good to hear. Yeah, if your virtual machine deployments are being good to go, you can go ahead and give me GTG in the chat, but really appreciate that update, Donald. Sorry, everyone, my computer is just being so slow right now. One moment, everyone. Sorry. I'll put the video in the chat too, Hugh. But sorry, it's just I think it's just slow today. Again, really appreciate everyone's patience right now. All right, here we go. All right. I'll let the video do most of the talking, but we'll play it for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll reconvene.
Hi, and welcome to the Surveil.
Oh, it's definitely chewing up some bandwidth. I agree.
Cost optimization asset management tool demonstration. So the very first step that a customer would go through when signing up with Surveil, actually just signing into the portal, it literally takes 5 clicks to get federated. In this instance, we've already been federated, but I'll go ahead and show you. So you'd sign in using Microsoft, right? And then when we get to this page, if you have not done your Azure Health Check yet, you'd have one more window before this, and it'd say authorize you authorize Surveil to actually do a read-only asset management consolidation report. And basically, it's 2 clicks. You authorize it, and you're only authorizing it into the licensing environment. So the Surveil tool is the first of its kind to use machine learning and artificial intelligence to create tags inside of your licensing environment. It's read-only, and you can take the tags that is created on our side on Surveil and actually apply them to your current. But there is no need for PII. We're not getting into your network, and we're not downloading any type of agent. Now, the first things that we would do is after we onboarded you, we'd actually sit there and we'd wait 3 weeks to actually get into it because it needs to read the telemetry. And after we do that, I'm going to show you, we get into it, and this would be your very first page that you look. And it's basically an overview of the Surveil asset management tool. And there's 3 different sections here that are really important to note. One is the Azure investment, the Azure section. Next one is the Office 365 section, but then there's also a risk and governance section. So when we let it sit for 3 weeks, there's 3 areas that we're going to go to originally, and I'll show you those 3 different areas. The very first one is Azure. So we would take a look at your Azure environment, and the first section that we'd actually go to is the overview page that would basically take a look at all of the different Azure environments that are there. It'll give us a total cost. This is a very small environment. How many are virtual machines? Gives us some knowledge about our services and networking. And let me go ahead and click on analytics. And while this is going, this is actually using Power BI embedded to take a look at this. So when we click on analytics, the first thing it's going to do is give us a really great overview of all of the different subscriptions, the actual Azure current costs, resource categories, gives us our top 5 costs by meter, tells us what our total spend year over year, but we can actually go into any one of these different areas, the cost summary, virtual machines, what they're being used over time. We can get into subscriptions, where we can actually look at subscriptions and say, okay, if these are the top 10 subscriptions inside of Azure, here you go. This is what the costs are. This is what the percentage change per periods, and we can get into. So as you see here, we can actually get very, very deep. But this is one of the first few things that we'd actually look at. But the second thing we'd actually look at after we kind of did a little bit of digging in here is actually get into the recommendations. And this is what we really love. So I'm going to go over to summary. Now, a lot of folks will tell you that Azure Advisor, and there is stuff that are inside of Azure that they can tell you some cost management, but Microsoft typically does not provide all this extra detail to understanding what's going wrong. And what we've noticed with Azure specifically, we've noticed that reserved instance, hybrid use benefit, idle services, idle databases, and the wrong type of disk typically equate to about a wastage of between 30 and 45%. So for instance, when you take a look at this particular screen, this says, okay, it's going to say, well, after we monitor your whole Azure environment, we're going to look at what we can do. And it says here, there's potential savings in this very small demo environment. There's $1,000 in potential savings. We click into the details, and it basically will tell us all of the different subscriptions, what could be used with reserved instance per se. Okay, that's a really good detail. And if we go ahead and implement these are the types of change and or savings that we can see over the year. The second thing is
All right, all right. We're coming out here with the last 15 minutes. So, the really big thing I want to highlight there was those recommendations, and I'll get a little bit more into that after we deploy the virtual machine, but that is really where we can get a lot of our cost savings opportunities. But I'm gonna go ahead and close out that video here, and we'll go ahead and share my screen one last time. All right, all right. What we're going to do here is just go directly to the resource. Our deployment has been completed. Very straightforward. Just go ahead and click on Go to Resource. Give everyone a moment to catch up if they need it. But go ahead and click on Go to Resource right there. It's going to redirect you to a new page, and at the very top, it's going to ask you whether or not you want to connect. Go ahead and click on the Connect icon or Connect tab up there at the very top. And go ahead and click on the top blade, that RDP blade. And then it will prompt you whether or not you want to download the RDP file or the remote desktop protocol file. Go ahead and download it. As you can see here, I need to clear out some of my downloads here. It's a little embarrassing, apologies. But we're gonna go ahead and open that RDP file. I know my moderator Blake's gonna give me a hard time after this session right now, but go ahead and open up that RDP file that you've downloaded. It's gonna prompt you whether or not you want to connect here. Go ahead and click on connect. Port prerequisite not met. Chuck, are you on premises? Are you at home right now, or are you at work per se? It might be your VPN that might be the issue, if you have one enabled. Because sometimes if you're at work, your firewall or your VPN might block it, especially if you're at the office. But from here, we're going to go ahead. If it prompts you to log in with your own credentials, go ahead and go to more choices. You're actually going to go ahead and use a different account, and that's where that demo user and password is going to come into play. So go ahead and enter in that demo user and that password. .1 exclamation point exclamation point. It's going to prompt you one more time. If you want to connect, you can go ahead and click on yes. And congratulations, a round of applause. We have just deployed, or we just designed, created, and deployed our virtual machine all in a little under than an hour and a half. This took me about 2.5 years at university. I think around my third year when I was at university to learn something or learn how to do something similar to this. And you guys just learned how to do it in a little less than under an hour and a half. So if that ain't cost savings, I really don't know what to tell you. I joke around about that. But one last thing, or two more things before we close out today's session. I always like to double check to make sure my data disk was attached to my my virtual machine here. So I'm going to go ahead and look in my File Explorer once it boots up here. And then we'll close out with a little bit more on Surveil. But if you go to your File Explorer here at the very bottom and then go to this computer, and if you have that data disk that says data disk D, then you successfully attach it to your drive or your virtual machine. Bada bing, bada boom, our virtual machine or our data disk has been properly attached and we are good to go. Yes, so Donald, so if anyone had that RDP file, they could technically access it if they had the username and password as well. So usually if they don't have a VPN or port or VPN or firewall enabled, then you can probably access it from any house, but you have to use the same username and password. And we actually delete these afterwards too, so don't worry if you're worried about that as well. But I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen here, and we're gonna talk a little bit more on Surveil. I'm gonna show you some really just sobering numbers, at least with this cost optimization tool, on really how you can really just save a lot of money just using these practices and these free health checks to really figure out how you're really spending your Azure spend at the current time. Just give me one moment while I pull up my info here. I don't know why my computer's so slow. Just need to reboot it at this point. Give me one moment, everyone. share my screen here. Man, oh man. Teams is just um, killing my computer right now, man. All right, give me one moment while I share my screen here. Again, apologies for the delays, everyone. So this is actually a health check or sample report. So basically with Surveil, you could do free health checks to really break down the type of environment, or to really break down what you may need in your environment, or what's being can be a cost of savings tools in general. So as you can see here, this is really where the money lies in these optimization recommendations. Because when you run this health check within your system, again, to reemphasize, it is read-only access to these systems. So it's not going to make any changes, or it doesn't even have permission to make any changes. But what it does is really kind of break down the biggest places you can really get cost savings opportunities. And a lot of the time, the three biggest areas are, hybrid benefit, reserve instances, and VM optimization. Because what ends up happening is a lot of the time these virtual machines will run unbeknownst to users, or there's not really a cleanup process or a check-in process to make sure everything is running at maximum optimization. So really these tools and really breakdowns and just recommendations really kind of help you narrow down what you need to do. But if you really want to get that close in view on what different things you can do with the recommendations, that's where it's going to be a cost to the service itself, because you really need to figure out, okay, where are the cost savings opportunities, and where can I really pinpoint those categories, or anything that may need to be reduced. Because as you can see here, you can also forecast how much you're going to spend here, and really this is how we gain trust, and really figure out how we can best save you guys money at the end of the day. Because with all these recommendations, what it really does is just show you that there is opportunities to save money more than anything. And as you can see here with reserve instances, there's about 170 reserve instance total recommendations. And really, you can really reduce a lot of your costs here. We've seen around 30% savings on average, which is really, really great. And even if you have this tool implemented in your own system, what it does, it still gives you that 30% savings, or that 30% savings year over year. And basically you continue to run it if you pay a monthly service fee around $275 per month to really make sure that your environment is up to date. And this is just an amazing tool, kind of like the video was showing with those recommendations. And you can even do it with your M365 licenses, because what ends up happening a lot of the time is if, like, say, for example, someone leaves the company, or someone unexpectedly decides to take on a new job, and they still use a license for their Microsoft products. This just lets you know about the current Microsoft licensing you may or may not be using at the current time. A lot of the times you can save a lot of money just from getting rid of those licenses that aren't being used at the certain time. And really, again, if you want to get a more close-in view of the types of licenses you may be missing out money on, or spending too much money on, that's where the service really comes into place. And again, it goes through everything and anything within your licenses in your Azure environment, again, to give you a high-level summary of the different things you can save money on. But this is just a sample report. I really just wanted to show you guys, to show you about those health checks and everything. And if you're really interested in getting a health check, we'll do a follow-up process with everyone to really break down and see if anyone is interested in getting more and learning more on Surveil, or just really how they can optimize their environments. But I'll stop sharing my screen here. So that was a sample report. And I guess my final thing before I head out here is I really want you guys, or I really want to ask this one last poll question here. Yes, it is. It is that license. But I just want to ask everyone if anyone is interested in learning more on how to reduce their costs with Surveil, or just learning how to reduce their costs in general with Azure. And does anyone have any questions on Surveil, the read-only access tool, more context? I can show you guys some more features that you can do within Surveil. Just want to take a moment to ask everyone that question, and also throw out this poll question as well, just seeing if you are interested in learning how to reduce your Azure spend and optimize your cloud environment. can see have a, let me see here. All right. Well, that is the conclusion of today's lab. Does anyone have final questions, comments, or concerns? Please let me know in the chat. I really want to help you guys out more than anything. I'll stay here for a little while longer, do some Q&A, or if anyone has any questions on Surveil, I'm also here as well to answer them as well. But really, more than anything, I'm really glad you guys stuck around to the very end to learn some more. If you guys want to put some feedback in the chat or just let me know kind of some of the biggest takeaways you got from today, I would love to hear some feedback. I always want to improve or just see where you guys really got a lot of your information for today, because I know a lot of us were more intermediate users. So if you got some information that's helpful for your journey today, I'm really glad. But if not, I'm here also as well to answer any questions. So leave your feedback in the chat. Just let me know if there's anything you'd like me to go over some more, or if you're good to go. Enjoy your week, enjoy your weekend, and we'll hope to talk to you soon. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Donald. Appreciate the love and support. Thank you, Hugh. Really appreciate that. Of course, Al. More than happy to. Yes, Fernando, no worries. We will send you a recording afterwards. And to all of our patrons as well, we will send the recording and the follow-up processes as well. Yes, of this session particularly. Of course, Chris. Of course, Frank. Happy. Kapil, of course. My pleasure.